One Broken-Hearted Lament. By Daniel Morris. Part 1. Major Arcana. He deals the cards. 4 was all he had time for today, and first out was the trusty ever-present death card. The Dark Rider has been with him for a while. It was upright tonight, changed the end of an era. Sure, he could believe that things were changing for him. He was becoming more aware of who he was supposed to be, so the death card came as no surprise to him. Second card out was the Tower. An obstacle, perhaps even a quest of some sort, lay ahead. This was the last thing he needed, more trouble, but forewarned was forearmed. Card number 3 was a welcome sight. The Lovers. Sadly, it came out in reverse, so that was not good. Loss, betrayal, more pain. Card number 4 was the only minor arcana in this draw, the Three of Swords. This one was never good news. A third-party love interest, a heartbreaking choice, perhaps even a loss of some kind. He had seen enough. He placed the card he'd drawn back into the box, put his shoes on, and walked out of his small one-bedroom apartment. He had to see her. He had to speak to her. Perhaps this would be the last time. Perhaps it will all become clear when he saw her. But the cards predicted nothing but trouble, but they weren't always right, were they? Part 2. Jane Austen would have loved this woman. She was sitting in her usual spot at the back of the grassy knoll, a nicely hidden-away bar people like him often frequented. Old Jack Conti was sitting at the bar sipping his cheap whiskey while some yuppie rich kid was busy yelling over his phone at someone. Everyone ignored the kid. He was an outsider and probably walked in here because he got lost was too fucking stoned to realize how far off the beaten track he really was. He walked past Jack and gave him a nod. The old man knew where he was going, knew who he was here for. Her siren's song could be felt from 50 feet across the road. There was just something about her so mysterious and strange. It was best to describe her as a Rubik's Cube with all the colored stickers pulled off, a puzzle so hard to solve that not even the smartest computer nerd in the world will be able to figure it out. That was the essence of why he cared so much for her. He hardly knew her. She kept her past to herself. Jack Conti claimed to know the truth, and he claimed to know where that scar on the left side of her neck comes from. Old Jack was a smart man, but did he really know everything about the barroom siren as he claimed? Only time and cheap whiskey would tell, but for now he had to dig into this puzzle for himself one more time, perhaps the last time. Mind if I sit? He asked as America's Sister Golden Hair started playing on the jukebox. He almost cursed it out loud, but he kept his emotions to himself. This was the song that he most equated her with, about a shy guy and the woman he loved, a golden-haired surprise. If you loved a woman so much that you preferred to do it at a distance and then finally made that move, yea, well, tonight was his turn to face the firing squad, so to speak. She looked up at him with her big brown eyes, smiled with pursed lips, and said in a bored tone, "If you must, I must. I don't want to bother you, but I've seen you around the last couple of weeks, and if I might be so blunt to say, you fascinate me," he said, and sat down across from her. The waitress, who was working on her degree in sociology and who hoped to become mayor of this fine city someday, hurried up to the table, and he turned his attention away from the barroom siren for a couple of seconds and locked eyes with the waitress. "Screwdriver for me, the lady will have a Manhattan." "Sure thing, right away," the waitress said and scurried away. "3, very perceptive of you to know what I drink, and very pretentious too. What if I only wanted a cup of coffee?" the siren asked, and he smiled. "You drink 4 Manhattans before 10, sit with the 5th one for a while until some guy walks up to you, and after some small talk you finish the drink, he picks up the tab and the two of you go off somewhere to do naked stuff. I know your pattern and you are only on your 2nd or perhaps 3rd drink. Your face hasn't even started to glow yet. You get a bit shiny once you've had your limit. I am sorry to say that, and please don't take it as being insulting or anything. It is just an observation from a long-time admirer. So you think that perhaps it is your turn tonight, huh? Perhaps you will draw the ace and the two of us will fuck like rabbits until daybreak, is that it?" she asked, and he shook his head just as the moody blues hit. "I know you're out there somewhere," started playing on the jukebox. "No, I'm not here for that. There are plenty of women around here if I was just here for that. I like you, I mean I'm attracted to you, and I want to know more about you," he said as the waitress arrived back with their drinks. "I will run a tab for you. Jack says that you can be trusted, and he says you insisted on buying him a few rounds." The waitress said, and he nodded. He wanted to be annoyed at Jack for doing this, but he didn't want his siren to see anything from him except positive emotions. "Sure, but no more than 5 drinks, okay? I'm not made of money," he said, and the waitress smiled. "I'll tell him," the waitress said, and walked away back to the bar. "That is very generous of you. Are you secretly a billionaire or what?" the siren asked, and he shook his head. "No military benefit, got shot during my time in the sandbox, thought that the army would toughen me up, make me more of an alpha male type. You know, same old, I don't really talk about myself, my story is not important. I approached you, I am here for you," he said, and she smiled. "4, you sure think a lot about yourself, don't you?" she asked, and he shook his head. "No, I don't. I am just not comfortable sharing my personal life with someone I just met," he said, and she smiled again. "But you want me to open up like a lotus flower and tell you my deepest, darkest secrets, is that it?" she asked, and he shook his head. "No, that is not what I want from you today. Let's trade names, drink a couple of drinks, and talk about stuff. What's your favorite movie, and so on and so forth," he said and took a sip of his drink while she finished off the drink she had in front of her and took a sip of the fresh one. Favorite movie in what genre? She asked. I have several favorites, name a genre. She said, and he smiled. The best way that he found to get to know somebody was to know what movies they like and why. It is also the fastest way to calculate their possible compatibility. Alright then, let's start with horror. Most of the women that I've met in my life don't like horror movies for some reason or the other. So of course it is not a deal breaker if you're one of those, but tell me, what is your favorite horror movie? He asked and she smiled. Easy, The Fly, directed by David Cronenberg and starring Jeff Goldblum and the wonderful Gina Davis. Goldblum is a scientist who invents teleportation. She's a reporter who falls for him because he is weird and brilliant, and if his invention works he will probably be the richest man on Earth, so she's getting in on the ground floor, you know. I don't think that she really loves him. She ends up blowing his deformed head of fly DNA-ravaged body with a shotgun, and it appears as if she aborted his child, so true love this was not. Yay, but she was afraid of giving birth to a maggot. She didn't want his child because she feared that it would be deformed and diseased, he interjected, and she smiled. That is what you think. She could have had the fetus tested, or she could have accepted the fly part and loved the child that she created with the man she supposedly loved unconditionally, she replied, and he smiled. 5. Unconditionally, that is only true in horseshoes and hand grenades. There is no such thing as unconditional love. That is some Jane Austen shit right there, he said, and she blushed for about half a second and quickly lifted her drink in front of her face in the hopes that he didn't notice her visceral reaction to his comment. Jane Austen shit? What do you know about Jane Austen shit? She asked with a grin on her red face, and he smiled before saying, she always has the seemingly rebellious woman who in the end falls for this supposedly perfect man. Oh, spare me. There's no such thing as perfection, no wonder she died an old maid. I actually think that she was a closeted lesbian, and because the society of that time frowned upon such behavior she remained in her closet, and wrote little love stories which reflected the period in which she lived. If she could write a romance with 2 female characters and get it accepted in the mainstream society at that time, I am sure that she would actually have had a happy ending in her life, she said, and they both laughed at the same time. So perhaps Jane Austen wasn't such an old maid after all. She probably had a live-in lover, a maid or a friend or a companion or someone who stayed with her at all times but who was secretly her little love muffin, he said, and they laughed again. Sure, it makes sense why her male protagonists all show feminine traits. If you read her books carefully, she probably wrote lesbian romances and then changed one of the women into a man for proprietary sake. So we actually solved the Jane Austen riddle, didn't we? How did we get to her in any case? We were talking about Gina Davis blowing her mutated lover's head off in The Fly. And by the way, if you watch The Fly, it is clear that Gina didn't abort the child, she said, and he again felt the need to interject. Yeah, well, I don't count that. It was a studio cash grab and tries its best to ruin what came before by trying to turn The Fly into a fucking slasher movie. Okay, then let us decide here and now and forever that The Fly does not exist, at least not in the same universe as the Cronenberg flick. Let's call it a Mandela effect of some kind, she said, and he shook his head. 6. Oh, don't get me started on that shit. These people have selective amnesia and now they think that it means something. It means nothing, there are no such animal. Move on, blog forth and go and smoke another joint, he said, and they both laughed again. He felt good. For the first time in years he was feeling good, and it was all because of her. Perhaps the cards were wrong, this was working out much better than he'd hoped. They finished their drinks and he ordered 2 more. He turned to old Jack, who glared at him, and he knew that the 2 of them needed to have a talk as soon as possible. As their next round arrived, the rude yuppie prick approached their table. Hey yo, I see you sitting here all by your lonesome, and all I can think about is how you will look sitting naked on my $30,000 Yana Louis Mattis sofa. It is covered with actual white rhinoceros skin, you know. I have a good bottle of French champagne too, and I imagine that you will. Trust me, my reality is better than your fantasy any day, the barroom siren said and stood up. He wanted to protest, he wanted to tell the little shit that he was here first and that she was his and that they were destined to be together, but it was that fucking 3 of Swords card, third-party situation, and heartbreak. He watched her leave and the waitress hurried over and handed him a bill. I guess that this will be yours then, she asked, and he nodded. Sure thing, how much? He asked and took his wallet out of his pocket. Call it 100 even with Jack's drinks and a reasonable tip for me included, the waitress said, and he smiled. Let's call it 120, you can put the rest towards your education, he said, and handed her the money. Then he stood up and walked over to Jack and sat down on a bar stool next to him. 7 Part 3. Who the hell is Tom Trobert anyway? So kid, what did you learn tonight? Old Jack asked and downed half a glass of whiskey. About what, her, the situation I found myself in, he asked, and old Jack smiled. About it all, kid, the whole shooting match. You watched her for how long before approaching her? What was it, around 20 nights? Old Jack asked, and he nodded. Yes, it was 20 nights since I first saw her there. I needed to build up some courage to speak with her, and then you well and truly screwed the pooch. Yeah, you are not much of a player, are you? You sat down, you made her smile, and then you didn't close the deal, so how does that make you feel? Old Jack asked, and he frowned. The old man was simply taking the piss now, and if he wanted to feel worse then, he could have simply thought about the yuppie who was now doing unspeakable things to the woman he desired so deeply. Yes, you're probably right, but I want a relationship with her. I want her to be part of my life, my future. You know that this fantasy that you have simply won't come true, not tonight, not tomorrow night, and not for all the nights left in creation. Yes, you might get her out of here and into your bed if you're quick enough and don't mess around with small talk, but you will just be disappointed. She is not the one, kid. The old man said and stared intensely at the empty glass in front of him, trying to will it full. But how do you know? He asked, and Jack pointed to his empty glass. Oh sure, have another on me. I told the waitress to give you 5 drinks and, sure kid, the last one just went down my throat and now I am thirsty again. The piss they call whiskey in this place is nowhere close to what I am used to but beggars and such. Old Jack mused while the bartender poured him another drink. Thanks kid, now let me tell you what I know about her. Once you know her story, once you know her dark truth, then you might look at 8 with different eyes at her. I am not saying this to be nasty or spiteful or contrary to your rich fantasy life, but are you sure you really want to know? Jack asked, and he nodded. All right then, he who pays the piper calls the tune, I suppose. Yes sir, I heard that, he said as the old man threw his drink down his gullet. Well, here goes. Ever notice that scar on her neck? Jack asked, and he nodded. Have you ever heard of a guy called the Kansas City Slasher? Jack asked again, and he nodded again. Sure, a piece of shit serial killer who drove around with his victims in the trunk of a Lincoln Continental. He booked into seedy motels where he tortured and then murdered these women, then he drove across state lines and ditched their bodies in secluded areas. The victims were usually found hundreds of miles away from where they were taken. The reason they call him the Kansas City Slasher is because he was actually an actuary from there who spent 20 days a month on the road in his vehicle and murdered young women on his off time. If I remember, the cops blew his head off at a motel because his supposed-to-be victim managed to escape and call for help. The cops showed up and shot him 16 times in self-defense, he said, and Jack smiled. Yea, due process is sometimes a bullet to the face, not that the bastard didn't deserve it. Anyway, the would-be victim is your amour. Trauma does strange things to people. Some suffer a traumatic life-changing event and become introverted, withdrawn, hermits who shun society because they have suffered an irreparable harm. They usually commit suicide or die grossly overweight and living with a dozen cats, you know, the classic stereotypes. But then there are the others, those who as a result of the trauma and their proximity to death lose all inhibitions. It is as if their brains rewires itself to short-circuit the internal monitoring systems we are all born with. The result is usually loss of inhibitions, hypersexuality, and a twisted need for self-destruction. She survived the serial killer, she survived what he did to her, she fought back, she escaped, but she is not free of him, she will never be free of him. Jack said as the bartender poured him a double shot of whatever passed for whiskey in this place. But I can save her, I can love her, I can make her well again, he sputtered, and the old man shook his head. No you cannot, Jack growled loudly, and he was taken aback by the old man's sudden temper flare-up. You have good intentions, kid, I know that. I can see that you believe inside your guts that you care for her. I believe you when you say that you love her and want to help her and I'm be her person. I hear you, kid, but it will never work, Jack said, and calmed down as suddenly as he angered. Yes, but how do you know? How can you be so sure? I will make her my focus, my one, my everything, and yes, I don't think that I can do it overnight, and we might have to go and see a therapist or a shrink or join a group or something, but eventually, he tried, and Jack just shook his head. Eventually you will give up and she won't even notice that you are gone. You are just digging a hole for yourself, and all that is going to be buried in that hole is your hopes and dreams for any type of normal relationship with her. Walk away, just walk away and go on with your life, Jack said as his hands and then the rest of his gaunt frame started to shake. I tried, son, I tried, God hear me, I tried. All I can do now is to watch her, hope that comes back in the morning, and drink till my body gives out. Being a father is not easy in the best of circumstances, but once you get a child back broken like this, you just realize that most of life is nothing but a pointless race in a crooked maze. So you're her father. Why didn't you tell me any of this earlier? 20 nights ago would have helped. Instead you just sat here and watched me fall in love with your daughter and you said nothing, he said loudly, trying to keep his temper in check. If you had explained things to me, if you had said something, you would not have believed me. You would have thought that I was just an old drunk, just a worthless old drunk trying to make your life miserable. You had to see it for yourself, you had to experience it, or you would never have believed me. I am sorry, but it was the only way, Jack insisted and stood up from his bar stool. I am going now. I hope to never see you here again. Go and live and love and be who you are supposed to be, anywhere but here, old Jack said, and stumbled along the length of the bar till he reached the doors. He walked out into the night trying to keep his balance. From the looks of him, he won't make it far. Perhaps he has a room around here somewhere, a place to sleep his drunkenness off, and perhaps dream of his daughter during a better time in her shattered life. Hi, I see the old man left. He usually walks me home every night. You don't look like a pervo, so would you walk with me? It is just 3 blocks. I would walk alone. It is just that there are some sick people out there, you know. The waitress who had been serving him during his tenure tonight suddenly asked, and he turned his head and looked at her. For the first time tonight he really looked at her, really saw her. 10 sure, just 3 blocks you say. Do we pass a coffee shop or a diner or something? I could do with a cup of coffee and perhaps even a sandwich, and you. he asked the waitress, who smiled, and he could see a tinge of pinkness radiating from her cheeks as she blushed at his suggestion. Yes, we pass a couple of Starbucks, and then there's Pop's place where the cab drivers hang out. They are always open. I can do with a coffee and a rest, my feet are killing me, she said, and he waited for her to clock out and grab her handbag from underneath the counter as he settled his final account with the bartender. Ready? She asked, and he nodded. The thing about lost love or broken relationships is normally given enough time we all become strangers again, you know, she said, and he nodded. He didn't really understand what she meant by it, but it sure sounded nice. 11 Part 4, Major Arcana 2. Earlier that same day, she meditated for 2 hours before picking up her tarot deck. She had a clear picture in her mind about what she needed the universe to answer for her on this sunny afternoon. She needed to know when she would finally meet him, her soulmate, the one she's been waiting for her entire life. She picked up the deck of tarot cards. It sat heavily in her small palm and was rather hard to shuffle, but with effort and concentration she could do it. She'd always meant to get a smaller, more modern deck of cards, but this set had sentimental value to her. They belonged to her mother and grandmother before her, and contained 3 generations of positive energy and love. It would be a shame to toss them aside just for the sake of having an easier time shuffling. She shuffled slowly at first, and then as she started to get into a rhythm, the cards started moving faster, and then a card flew out of the shuffle, and she smiled as the card landed face up on the table. The Lovers. Yes, she said loudly as another card fell out, the World. I have it all to gain, the world is mine, my dreams are coming true, she said, and concentrated on her shuffle. Please, universe, hear this voice call from the darkness and grant me a glimpse into what is waiting for me, she asked the universe loudly, who seemed to respond by losing 2 cards from the shuffle, the Hierophant and the Sun. It will all be all right, a wedding, a bright future, she said as she looked at the 2 cards. She smiled and gathered her cards together. She put them away and brushed her hair. It was time to go to her waitressing job at the grassy knoll. I will meet him tonight, I will meet him tonight, I will meet him tonight, she repeated over and over again as she left her 1-room apartment and started walking towards destiny. Fade to black.